We are back with another live episode of the Bully Ball podcast. I am Jason Aponte, joined as always by Steph Sanchez. Steph, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I got my big mug of coffee, and I'm ready to take on the day.
Steph, let me ask you a question. And before we get into the 49ers stuff, I always like to introduce things. First of all, it's a live show, so we want to make sure that we let people fester in and everything. So when we were just sitting in the waiting room before this, I was playing PlayStation off of my iPad. Now I feel like that is me selling myself short on my TV, right? Like, why would you play off of your iPad when you have a huge TV? And yesterday I was doing the same thing because I was trying to watch baseball and trying to track my parlays, which actually hit yesterday as well too. But Steph, am I doing this PlayStation 5 thing completely wrong by sitting here in front at my desk playing off of my iPad waiting for the show to start?
I didn't even know you could do that. Like, is that like a
Mhm.
new PlayStation thing?
Remote play, yeah. So basically, you
Okay.
have to have your PlayStation on rest mode, and then you can open up the app, and you can actually take your controller and set it up to your iPad as well too, and then just go ahead and play through there. That's what I was doing. So remember when you were saying Jason looks like he's recording off a potato? It's probably because I was
He
streaming.
did, guys. He did.
It's probably because I was streaming my PlayStation to my iPad.
Okay.
Am
Good
I doing this
excuse.
wrong? Am I doing it wrong? No, did I spend all that money to play it off
No,
an iPad? Like,
no.
am I doing this
I
wrong?
mean, kind of. Like, why wouldn't you use your TV? Okay. Does the iPad? Not to derail us too long here, but does the iPad, if you take it with you somewhere else and you brought your controller with you, like let's say out of your house, like
Mhm.
would that work? Like, could you play it like remotely like that?
Unfortunately, no. And
So
and
what's the
and
point?
those are the same questions. So, for instance, if I'm in the house and let's just say someone wants to watch TV,
Mm.
like Averly wants to watch
Oh
Super
yeah,
Y on her TV. So, okay, we'll put it on the TV, but I'm able to sit there and play my PlayStation. It is convenient while you're in the house if someone else wants to use the television. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think that's great. But I think it's so convenient. Like I'm sitting here, I'm waiting for the show to start, and I'm just, I'm trying to beat Resident Evil 2 as far as I can go. And then I hopped on with you. I just think it's convenient. That's all.
sure. I mean, if it's convenient to you, then yeah, that's fine. You're doing it
All right.
right then.
I'm glad that we started this show off with a bang. But you know what else is convenient? The NFL's Super Bowl schedule event is done. People are booking flights. I'm headed to Pittsburgh for week one. Shout out to
Nice.
the plug who gave me the early on, little hey, week one's gonna be this team, week three's gonna be this team. It's okay. We don't have to put it out there about who was thinking about it first. I'm done with that. Because if you put it on Twitter, everybody's just gonna say you don't know anything. What's your source? And then when you get it right, nobody's ever gonna say, "Oh, wow, you got it right." Right? No.
That's not true.
But Steph, what are we doing win-loss predictions? Because I've got the 49ers 20-0. Watch your back, Miami Dolphins. There's no team that can beat this team. You are on the way, and you are about to watch a monumental year. And it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Jake Moody could be starting week 4 against the Arizona Cardinals, and they're fried. Steph, early early on predictions that way.
Look, I give this team at least 10 wins, right? And I only say 10. That could be modest, if you think this team is as good as it is. The problem with this team is that they always seem to drop games that they should win, right? I gave them 10 and I feel like that's a pretty good number. Should they win more? Yeah, absolutely. Will they though? Yet to be seen. We'll see.
That's the thing is you look at these rosters, right? And I think this is the optimistic part that 49ers should have. 49ers fans should have. You look at those rosters and you're like, they're better than them, they're better than them, they're better than them, they're better. And you do understand that there's going to be like these slip up games,
Hmm.
these weird games against teams that they either should beat or they just lose in a bizarre way. And it generally starts early in the season, right? The 49ers, Kyle Shanahan generally starts the season slow. Like I wrote this long, long article on Niners Nation, which I will retweet before the season starts because I'm not writing it again, about every Kyle Shanahan offense and where they were led. He was an offensive coordinator, the circumstances, who was the quarterback. Still, there's one thing that remains constant, whether he was the offensive coordinator for Cleveland, Houston, and then for the 49ers. sloppy play, penalties, turnovers, offense starts slow. Almost every single year. The only year that you can really change that narrative is the Detroit game, in which they scored a bunch of points, but they were still sloppy. They still failed to finish that game out. And then you have last year, the rain, all those things. That
Mhm.
game wasn't straight, right? 16.5 points per game in week 1 under Kyle Shanahan, right? And I want to ask you this because I believe it was at the Dwight Clark event where Kyle Shanahan said, I am very happy that we're going to be facing the Philadelphia Eagles in week 13. And I felt like he's self aware
Yeah.
about two things. One, maybe, maybe the quarterback that he wants to start won't be, ready in time. But two,
Mhm.
he does understand that his team starts slow. I mean, they play probably his starters in preseason, probably play the equivalent of 2 quarters in 3 games. And then he expects them to hit the ground running. I also do want to point out week 1 is a weird week for everybody. The Steelers, who the 49ers have, the last 2 years have beat the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. One with Wash Ben Roethlisberger, the other with Mitchell Trubisky. So week 1 is the weirdest week of the year for everybody, but the 49ers still seem to start slow stuff.
Yeah, they do. I want to ask you this. Like, do you feel like now that Christian McCaffrey is on this team, that the team can start off, kind of on a high note? Because that kind of felt like last season, him, being added to this team kind of changed the entire offense. And, clearly what Kyle Shanahan was able to do, not just with McCaffrey in the run game, but just like entirely an offense. So do you feel like that will make a difference, or are we still going to see the same 49ers of old to start?
I hope so. And I think that's the idea behind that as well, too. You have to remember last year, besides the rain, George Kittle didn't play in that game
Hmm.
in week 1. And that's another thing that we have to be hesitant about when we're going about season predictions. You never know what's going to happen in training camp. Someone's going to tweak something, not play. Someone gets hurt in the game, during the game. Something is weird. Again, there's always these wonky games that always happen. The Chicago Bears beat the 49ers last year, and that was one of 3 victories for them. One of 3. And that's not good. That's not great. I'm not here to blame the quarterback for it, but the defense didn't necessarily play well either. They gave up 2 busted coverages that ended up in touchdowns. And then when it starts to rain and your offense really needs to pick it up, then it's really hard. And then we forget Debo Samuel fumbles in the red zone. That could have been a touchdown. There's so many things that go into it. So when people look at win-loss record for quarterbacks, it's always, did they win when this quarterback started? Well, give me the context of that. And then Elijah Mitchell gets injured in this game. All
Yeah.
of these things have happened, right? And a lot of people forget all those things. But that's what's weird about the NFL, right? Every time that you look at a game and you're like, this team should beat this team, this is when it just goes apart, right? And that's the parody of the NFL. So for 49er fans, you can be optimistic and say 14-3. I've got them at 13-4 by the least, right? I think the Bengals are going to give them a problem. I think that
Yeah.
they lose one of those weird games to Seattle this year. I don't think that they sweep them as well. But the other games that are going to be lost this year are not going to be something that you saw coming, right? It's going to be something very weird. And I do think it's important for the 49ers to start off in week 1 with a victory, but Christian McCaffrey definitely has a chance to do that no matter who's the starting quarterback. Sam Darnold, Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Jake Moody, whatever it is.
So that's the other thing too. Like, in addition to already having these like early season woes, you're now going into the season not knowing who the quarterback is going to be. At least right now in May, right? We don't know. Hopefully by week 1, you have a good idea. But that quarterback is not going to be. It's a possibility that quarterback is not going to be the same guy. It's not going to be Brock Purdy. Maybe it might be Sam Darnold. It might be Trey Lance. Like we just don't know. So, and we're just expecting that guy to go in there and handle business the first few weeks of the season, what have you. Like, if Brock Purdy's not ready, that could be kind of shaky too, in its own right. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors in the past. There's been a lot of factors for why I think this team has started slow, but I think you hit it on the head. Like, it's mostly the discipline stuff that's been the biggest issue for this team, and hopefully they can get that sorted out in preseason, right? Because it's one of those things that you don't want to have to coach, or you don't feel like you need a coach until things start to get a little, go a little south as far as discipline goes, and the penalties and all that. But I feel like that always should be something that you're like coaching into your team, especially to start the season, because you're dealing with, maybe some new starters, some new guys, new plays, everything, right? So even though it may feel like, okay, these guys are professionals, they're veterans, they should know not to commit this foul, or do this and that. It happens, right? Just because it is the start of the season, and it's like the first day back at school. Sometimes you forget some things and you get back in your groove. But yeah, I think hopefully, since Kyle Shanahan is clearly aware that this is an issue, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't, right? Because he gets asked about it every single year at this point to start the season. If he's aware that this is an issue, address it earlier before it even becomes an issue, right?
Yeah, and that's why it was funny to me to hear Kyle say, "I want to play them in week 13." And I feel the same way. You can't rush to judgments after week 1, week 4, right? Like, 12, 13 weeks is a good enough sample size to realize where a team's going, all of those things. So I do really love that answer because one, it's self-aware with his own struggles in terms of his team, but two, it really means that he understands that you don't know what a team is going to be until they start to get rolling, right? Like for instance, if there is, God forbid, an injury to a impact player and you get them back later on and you start the roll and everybody wants to be hot going into the end of the season and into the postseason in terms of health, all of those things. That's what's weird about the NFL, right? You have teams that you set your watch to and say, this is a team that's going to be competing at the end of the year for something. Then 2 impact injuries happen to them. Boom, they're knocked out. They're not even the discussion anymore. So, and then there's other teams that, again, that you feel like that and it happens to them. And then the 49ers run into them and they roll through them. Like if God forbid the Bengals come to town and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are out for the year for something, that completely changes the dynamic of the game, clearly, right? Like, and that's the thing is, while we have this exercise of picking wins and losses, it's really a futile exercise because things change from day to day, week to week. It's such a long time. And here's Kyle Shanahan's direct quote: "I'm glad we're not playing Philly week 1. I want to play them at a better time. I want to make sure our whole team is right." That's exactly what we were talking about. That is exactly what he was thinking about. Now, Steph, rookie minicamp has begun, and it's time to start getting hyped about players that probably won't be on the roster at the
Stop
end of.
it.
I'm sorry, Steph. I had to deal with Trent Sherfield 2 years ago being the new AB because he caught a few passes and he wore 81
That's
and
true though. That got out of hand.
the list goes on and on of OTA, minicamp, camp warriors, guys that are ready to tear it up. I think the only guy that really tore it up and moved on to the team was Jordan Mason. That was the one where we were all hyped. We were like, hey, Jordan Mason is that guy. And you know what? That one worked out. Trent Sherfield made the team clearly, but Antonio Brown, because he wore 81. But there's a new video circulating of a new player, Steph. Do you want to take us through that as Rob pulls it up and talk about the player?
Yeah, I mean, this one has been generating a lot of buzz in 49ers Twitter and just 49ers fans circles, right? And it's Ja'Cory Pearson, XFL star wide receiver. And he did pretty good with the Sea Dragons. He led them in receptions, and I believe something else as well, but I don't recall. So a solid player. But let's not get carried away. Like this is one rep, right? Off of one clip that we just happen to get on social media. We don't see all of the others. So Kyle Shanahan has made it a point to bring in a lot of wide receivers, not just for rookie camp, but also it seems like going into OTAs and training camp, there's going to be a battle there, right? And I don't know, maybe is he trying to light a fire under, Danny Gray, or like, I don't know. Maybe they're getting ready for Juwan Jennings' departure after this season. Could be. But, the point is there is going to be an opportunity, I think, for some of these guys to stick. But let's not assume that Ja'Cour Pearson is going to be that guy. If I recall, he was trying out, right? He was at rookie minicamp on a tryout basis. So I haven't heard that he's been signed by the 49ers or any other team. He also went to the Colts and Falcons minicamp on a tryout basis. Haven't heard either one of those teams sign him either. So, it's not a guarantee of anything. And of course, he was solid in the XFL. Maybe he'll continue to be there. Maybe a team picks him up. I don't know. But, I think it's a lesson in, maybe just taking all of these things with a grain of salt, and not getting too carried away with some of these, off-season clips. I love the off-season clips personally because I just like to see how guys are doing. And, you get a look inside what's going on in some of these practices and whatnot. But, just pump the brakes a little bit sometimes because the hype, sometimes gets a little out of control. So, yeah, he might be good, but we'll see. The 49ers will have to sign him first, guys.
And again, 53 men make the roster. How many tight ends? How many wide receivers? 5 to 6. I mean, you've got locked in 4 guys pretty much at this point. And, the training camp hero that I'm looking at is Kalen Laborn of Marshall. I think he's the Jordan Mason this year. There's 3 people that are on the clock in this training camp. TDP, Ambry Thomas, Danny Gray. All 3 of you are on the clock. Mm-hmm. All 3 of you have to show something to stay on this roster. Kyle Shanahan has made no bones about getting rid of people, even if you're a 3rd-round pick. Trey Sermon, the list goes on and on. Dante Pettis was even higher. It's time for you to go. It's one of these 3 guys. Well, all 3 of these guys need to show a little something. That's why I think Laborn kind of jumps over TDP because he is athletic and he feels like a Kyle Shanahan undrafted free agent gem, just like Jordan Mason. With Danny Gray, I don't want to make sure that I bury him myself, but I'm not talking about what my feelings are. It's what their feelings are and how they feel about him in the building. And I do think a little bit of it has to do with Danny Gray was supposed to be tied to Trey Lance being the long-term starter. And as we know right now, we don't think that that's something that if Brock Purdy's healthy can happen, right, at this point. The other thing is, Ambry Thomas, I'm sorry, that's another 3rd-round pick that is just, again, I'm reading what this isn't tea leaves. I'm reading what the 49ers are doing. So go back to the Atlanta game last year when Samuel Womack has to come in because Charvarius Ward gets injured and go play outside, and you have Ambry Thomas who played down the stretch the year before and literally can get no time on the field. That's more telling than any sort of tea leaves. That's literally what the team is telling you what they're doing. So those 3 guys are on the clock. Ironically enough, all 3 are 3rd-round picks. And it'll just lend to the idea that 3rd-round picks aren't exactly the 49ers forte, even though I think the world of Jair Brown, who we're going to get into in a little bit, after what we heard from Steve Wilkes. But 3rd-round picks have not been the 49ers' strong suit. Nice. Is that a Charlie Brown mug, Steph?
No, it's actually it's Gudetama.
It's
actually my girlfriend's mug. She loves Gudetama. And it's a 20-ounce mug. Okay, it's 20 ounces.
Yeah.
So I started taking like collagen in the morning, and like it's like a powder, but it's like the unflavored one. And anything that tastes unflavored tastes like shit. Like
Rob, bleep it out, Rob.
Bleep it out. Leave it out, Rob. But you've had have you had unflavored like Greek yogurt before?
Absolutely not. The idea of eating yogurt is gross. No.
Okay, fair. Fair. But so basically I have to like double the amount of coffee I would get to like kind of take away the flavor of the powder. So that's why I have to drink like so much coffee just to get through those 2 scoops of collagen in the morning. But anyway, yeah, I mean, some of the other reports that we heard out of rookie minicamp, and I'm kind of going based off of Grant Cohn's the good and not so good. report that he always puts out for practices. So in the good column, he had Jair Brown, Daryl Luter, both of which he said they are built like third-year pros. So they look like NFL players already, and that's already a good sign when you don't have to put the extra work in the weight room, and you can come in ready. Brandon Willis also on the good. Ronnie Bell, he did point out his size. He's a smaller guy, but he can make these circus catches. He can make the tough catches look easy and things like that. So he kind of called him the anti Dante Pettis, which could be good. Could be good for this team.
Could be great.
We'll see. Yeah, it could be real good. Linebacker Jalen Graham was also on the good, who you mentioned. Kalen LeBourne, Ja'Cour Pearson, he did have on the good. Isaiah Winstead, and center Ilm Manning. Now on the not so good. You ready for these? And let's not overreact to these two, because it is May. Some of these players have some time to get,
of course,
acclimated and whatnot. Cameron Latou, he did say that he's big. He looks like a veteran. Matt Barrows also pointed out the same thing. He passed the eye test of size, right? But Grant Cohn just said he doesn't move with a lot of finesse, and he needs to improve his concentration in traffic. Fine. Cameron Latou, I think we knew he was kind of raw. He's still somewhat new to the tight end position, so I don't think that's exactly surprising. I don't think it's something we should overreact to. D Winters, little overweight, a little out of shape. That's okay too. It's not ideal, but it's May. As long as he can, get back into shape by training camp, he should be good. He has some time, right? So we're not worried about D Winters too much. But just something to keep an eye on. And then Joey Fisher couldn't even finish the practice, right? Or he had to take a break at some point. And Santa Clara isn't that hot. You know what I mean? And so that I'm keeping an eye on that one, because that's a slightly concerning. So
it'll get warmer soon.
Yeah, exactly. It could just be a conditioning thing, as of right now, in the lead up to the draft, maybe there was some not so much good conditioning on his part, but again, he has time. We're not overreacting about it. It's just something to keep an eye on. So that's the good and not so good that we got from Grant. And of course, David Lombardi had the clips of Jake Moody, kicking through the uprights. I know you like to see that, Jay.
No, I love to. No, don't like. I'd love to see it. Super Bowl.
Let's go. But you know what? I think it's cool to see because I was saying this yesterday on 49 K-Pod. I think a lot of us need the validation that this pick was the right one in the third round. And yeah, you could say what you want about, taking a kicker in the third round. But again, if he is good, I don't think we'll really care about that, in years' time. So we need to see it. We need to see the content of him actually making these kicks. He's in the NFL now. Okay, he's still making these kicks happen. So that's good. Because that's one of the first steps. As long as the transition is going well, that's already a good sign, right? So he looked comfortable. But yeah. Another guy I was going to mention, Leroy Watson, who former tight end, now he's going to be competing at right tackle, maybe a depth spot, right? He's up to 300 pounds.
Wow.
Big dude.
Yeah. So Jake Moody kicking it over the net from 30 yards out and hitting someone in the parking lot. Yeah, hell yeah, it does. Hitting someone in the parking lot trying to get into their car, right? Almost like when Happy Gilmore hits the ball and he knocks the lady out of the window, or he hits the guy in the head. That's all I picture with Jake Moody, honestly. I also have to say that the black shorts with the red tights is an attribute. Swagger's an attribute. Look good, play good. So Jake Moody's already impressing me, and he's my day one winner from what I saw and everything. Super Bowl on the way, NFC missing pieces here. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the guys that you said in the good, right? Jair Brown is somebody who Steve Wilkes really came to the press conference in which it was essentially his first real big press conference for 49ers fans and the impression that he was going to give. effusive with praise. And when I talked to Tig, he said that he spoke to them and he told them it feels like I belong here. And Wilkes echoed that. And this is his direct quote. His tape just jumped off at you. He just makes plays. His dedication to the game. He's mature. He sees it with a different lens. And I said, this guy right here can be the future for us. That's exactly the same thing that Tig told me when we spoke, talking about how they felt about him, how he felt that it was a perfect thing, how they had no idea why he slid so far, which is why they made the trade up. It doesn't it feel like it's all lining up for Jair Brown to be this new guy for them. Like the first pick, when you see a trade up, you think, okay, this team is really invested in him, but their statements line up completely. And I think that is the best part about at least that part of what Wilkes said, because Wilkes said a lot, and we have a lot more to talk about when it comes to that.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy to think based on not what just one person has said, right? This is now like multiple people, within the organization being asked about Jair Brown. And like you said, it all lines up. And I don't think it's crazy to think that this is probably their favorite pick of the entire draft. Just not because of, just how they speak about him, but just what they say about him, right? Is that kind of the same thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Point one, same thing as point B. Or point two. But no, like I think it's very clear. Like they love this guy, they love this pick, and he is going to have a role on this team sooner than later. I think especially based on some of the things that Wilkes said about him. Like I definitely got that sense. So it could be somewhat of, what we saw with Jaquiski Tartt in his final year with the team, where Talanoa Hufanga was getting onto the field and they were kind of, rotating between those guys. Jair Brown may make that same situation happen because he's going to make it hard to keep him off the field, right? So I think we can see him, and he's a ball hawk. I think that much is true, and that's something that we're gonna really want in the secondary, especially Steve Wilkes, right? So, and he's more aggressive. I think maybe we see him in blitzes, things like that. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for him to get on the field this season, and I'm really excited to see it just based on what everyone has been saying about him.
100%. I mean, again, the tape speaks for itself, but you want two guys that are going to be playing in the box, can play up top. And I do think that you will see a little bit more of Jair Brown with Hufanga and Gibson on the field to have them roaming around in the middle. And while Steve Wilkes wants to run single high, let Gibson be the veteran guy who's on the back end and understands everything and understands where he needs to be. So you will see Jair Brown on the field. But I see a lot of questions about the nickel, and I think this is a perfect way to segue into nickel. I mean, Steve Wilkes said that the 49ers went out and signed the best nickel corner available in Isaiah Oliver. And I think that that's a huge vote of confidence. And it also lets me know that a little bit of what the 49ers have been doing, at least in terms of defensive players that they've drafted and brought in, has a lot to do with what Steve Wilkes wants to do. And I do think his input is bigger than people realize, because you do get someone like Jair Brown. For him to say the best nickel corner available, I won't disagree with that if the results turn out the way that they want them to. It was a little bit shocking to hear that, though. I feel, Steph.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally, I wasn't too surprised by it. Clearly they set out to get certain free agents this offseason, and it seemed like Isaiah Oliver, just based on the timing of when it happened, like it seemed like Isaiah Oliver was a name that they had like circled, right, for the free agents. And yeah, I agree. I mean, they got a lot of secondary guys via free agency and the draft, and so I think, yeah, you got to imagine that Steve Wilkes had a big hand in that. Obviously, I mean, I think he wants to revamp the secondary a little bit. And hey, I'm totally cool with that, right? I think he's the perfect guy for it, and I think we're gonna see this secondary possibly look the best it has since the Kyle Shanahan Lynch era, right? So I'm really excited for that. I think, you have Chris Kosaric on the D line. That spot's locked down. You got the linebackers, Fred Warner, Johnny Holland, the coach there. That's locked down. Like they're solid. You don't even have to worry about them anymore. And now that we have a more secondary focused coach, like I think that's gonna, improve this defense leaps and bounds from what they were before, because that was always kind of the one thing that you can say to yourself needed to improve just a little bit better for this team. And Mike Clay, he ranked them 24th, right? The
Ooh, the
cornerback unit, or
disrespect.
their secondary unit. Which,
The disrespect.
yeah, you can call that disrespectful, but at the same time, like, I could see it from the outside looking in. I could see why someone would have that thought. I mean, last season they gave up like the most 20 plus yard plays, right? Through the air. So,
But
yeah,
that was,
they
to be
weren't
fair,
perfect.
that was a bit of like a 4 to 5 week stretch. And I feel like that kind
I
of
mean,
went away after a while.
yeah, I mean, we know that this unit did improve, right? And we know that like Charvarius Ward is solid, right? And we know all these things about some of the guys that we have, but I think it is still yet to be like this consistent thing. Our secondary was not a no-fly zone, and
Right.
with like the pass rush that we had, I feel like there's opportunity for that to be that. And I think with Steve Wilkes, that's kind of something that we'll probably see more of. Um, and I think we'll see a slightly different style of coaching. I know altogether it was a big emphasis to keep most everything the same, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. But we're gonna see little wrinkles, and that's what I'm excited about the most. One small wrinkle is that he's going to be calling plays from the booth, not from the field like Robert Saleh and, D'Amico Ryans did, where we got all those like awesome reactions from the field after a big play. We love those. But now, he's going to be coaching from the booth, which I personally totally get. I have no issues with it,
Mhm.
because I feel like Steve Wilkes is going to coach the secondary kind of like Kyle Shanahan coaches the offense. Let me explain. Kyle Shanahan, head coach of the 49ers, he's going to address the team when he needs to. He's going to do all the head coach admin stuff and whatnot. He's a head coach. But he's really the coach of the offense, and he leaves the defense, I think, up to the defensive coordinator for the most part. Like those, they kind of are two separate, very separate units, and he trusts his defensive coordinator to kind of be the head coach of the defense. But I feel like Steve Wilkes, defensive coordinator of the defense, he's going to be focused, I think, more on the secondary because, like I mentioned, Chris Kosarick, he defensive line lockdown, linebackers lockdown. Secondary needs some work, needs some finessing, right? And that's like your blueprint. That's what you've always like coached, and that's like your specialty. So I think he's gonna be looking at the secondary more than anything. And how do you do that best? From the booth, right? Because you see things from up top, you see the entire field. That's why all 22 is a thing, right? So you can see the coverages, so you can see like the spacing of everything, the timing of everything. You get a better feel for all of that. So if he's going to be making plays for the defense and he wants to have a better focus on the secondary and the coverages and all of that, what better way to do that than from the booth, from up top, right? So I think that's the reasoning for that. Yes, I'm going to miss the the antics on the field a little bit, some of the reactions that we got. But hey, have a camera on the booth as well, because I have a feeling that we'll see some good reactions from there as well.
And to your point a little bit about the all 22, this is why I always buy the cheapest seat in the house. I love watching the
Oh,
plays
is that
develop
why?
whenever I, yeah. Oh, well, I'm broke too. Please donate to the show because I'm struggling to pay rent and all this stuff. No, but I love watching from the top because you see things develop. Sometimes it's a little bit frustrating. Like I can think of the NFC title game in LA. I'm watching George Kittle scream down the middle of the field, and I'm yelling, Kittle, 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 Kittle. Jimmy doesn't see him, but you do see the play develop, and I do like watching it from up there. Obviously, being closer is cool for that reason, but it's the perfect tie into my budget and also me being able to watch the all 22 a little bit early. But I did see that came up a little bit when it came to who are they going to turn the camera to after strong defensive plays. And in our group chat, I sent the John Lynch meme, like that everybody
Still
uses.
undefeated to
It
this
is,
day.
it
Like,
is,
it's
it is.
so hilarious.
It's the John Lynch meme from the Minnesota 2019 playoff game. He just looks so proud. He looks so happy. Like he's
And
like,
like it's the 360 turn for me. Like it's the pan. Like who? It's
and
just
he
so perfect.
and he knows that the camera's on him. And he doesn't break character at all, man. So it's either it's either you just go to that, or there's the other John Lynch gift that we use, which is him just sitting in the booth like with his hand over his face like that as well. So, I mean, that John Lynch meme, whenever there's a free agent, every single
So
person
good. It's
uses
so
just
good.
that, right? Like they're just like, it's John Lynch smiling with the it's he looks so proud of that team. He looks so proud of what they've built, and he doesn't break character. That is an undefeated gift goat. But yeah, that's what they should pay
Man.
to. But all right, let's get a little bit more serious. So this is it right now.
Like
It's
to
so
this
good.
day, like yeah, to this day, like it still makes us crack up. Like it's
It's
just
so
so
good. It's dude. Anytime a free agent is available, that's the gift that you're gonna see either in the comments or people quote tweeting. It's just he looks so happy, and Adam Peters is there as well too. They're both smiling. They understand what they built. They're watching a playoff victory. They know they're going to the NFC title game to watch the Green Bay Packers. He's just so happy, man.
it's
But
the pan for me. It's the
it
pan.
is, and he just doesn't
It's
break
beautiful.
character. He's smiling like a proud father. Like. All right.
It's too good.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. Let's keep it serious. But it looks like Steve Wilkes has some things to say. And when I said earlier about players who are on the clock, he did have things to say about Javon Kinlaw. And I don't know if there's anybody more on the clock than Javon Kinlaw. And I want to be clear about this. Injuries are something that he can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, this is a results-driven business. And you have to perform if you're expected to stay on a roster. Now, players become victim of their draft capital. In this particular case, Javon Kinlaw is replacing someone who was beloved by 49er fans in DeForest Buckner. All of these things are working against him at this point. Injuries are not his fault. He didn't draft himself there. He didn't mean to replace somebody else. At the same time, none of that matters when it comes to a result business thing. The injuries thing is what I'm more sympathetic towards. But Steve Wilkes said, Kinlaw has just been tremendous since I've been here. He has not missed a day of offseason training, so I'm excited to see exactly where he's going to be. Steph, I said Ambry Thomas is on the clock, Danny Gray's on the clock, TDP is on the clock. Javon Kinlaw's on the clock, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he has been. And then that's why, like, I'm a little surprised by, I guess, the hype of Kinlaw. Going into this season, Steve Wilkes hyping him up here for sure. I want to ask you, Jay, are you buying another season or another off season of Javon Kinlaw hype?
The naturally optimistic person that I am, and I never have anything negative to say about this team and anything like that.
I'm like, that's
yeah.
a no.
Yeah, I am though. I am as a rotational player. I think he is. As a rotational player, I think he is. And unfortunately, that's not what the 49ers drafted him to be. But when you have Javon Hargrave, you have Eric Armstead, he can still impact the game. And you have to hope that he's so invested that, one, he wants to contribute to this team. Two, he has to put tape out there that's good. Because regardless if he's going to continue with the 49ers, someone else has to be able to see that tape and say, I can get something from that. I think he still has something in the tank. This is a prove-it year for many things. Whether he's going to be a 49er, I don't know. Whether he wants to continue in his league, I think that's the bigger question. And I think that's what he really needs to put in. So, yes, I'm optimistic that as a rotational player, somebody who will not be counted on for every single snap, who can be a base down lineman, who can stop the run, if, you need to give Hargrave or Armstead a breather, then I do believe in him in that way. And I do want to give the kid a shot, man. I really do. There's something about his story and about where he is that I do want to see him succeed. So, I was joking in the beginning because clearly I'm not always positive and I've got many bad things to say, about the team at times. But yeah, man, I want him to succeed. And Corey Soto says was late, but Resident Evil 2 is one of the greatest PlayStation games of all time. The lab is the best. I'm getting through it. I'm on the Claire Redfield side of it now. I've already beaten the Chris the Leon Kennedy side because he's looking for Chris. So yeah, I mean, all right. But yeah, Javon Kinlaw, Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, So all those things you said, yes, like I am also still hopeful that he can be something like, but I'm not buying the hype again, because this time last year he came in best shape of his life. We saw it. He looked like a freaking action figure.
He looks like a
Um
minotaur.
yeah, yeah, he really does. And so all those things aside though, we didn't get to see it on the field. Like he looks like a beast, but he on the field, he left much to be desired even when he was out there last season, and for whatever reason why that might be, I don't know. To your point, could he be better served as a rotational piece? I think yes, because I think it might be the amount of snaps that he was getting, and quite frankly, I don't even think it was that many snaps, but like clearly with the issues that he's had with his knee, I think keeping his snaps at a minimum is probably best for him. You know what I mean? So think about Solomon Thomas. Also, was he was third overall as well, right?
Third overall.
Kinlaw was first round, but
13th.
13, yeah. So the expectations were probably, just as big for both of these players. For Kinlaw, maybe even higher because he was replacing Buckner. I'm beyond that point though of just feeling like he's replacing that, because at this point he doesn't even feel like he was meant for that. But a rotational role for him could work. Think about Solomon Thomas. It's like, yeah, we know you're not going to be that guy, but you're still on this team. We're not going to let go of you. Just be a rotational piece, and we'll see what you can do. So that could be the role that Kinlaw has this season. That could work because they have Javon Hargrave now as well, and so the middle could do well with Kinlaw coming off in certain situations. So it could work, but I'm not buying another off season of Kinlaw hype and thinking that he's going to be like this crazy guy on the field. You know what I mean? Like I think I'm past that. So I'm
Well, I'll say
hopeful, but
this. Brad Graham's conspiracy theory is that Eric Armstead is getting leaner and leaner to play more edge in certain spots. Now, that would leave it open for Kinlaw to play defensive tackle in those roles. But again, right now, it feels like when you go ahead and you address the defensive tackle position with the high, your highest paid free agent in day one, it's not exactly the vote of confidence that you believe that Javon Kinlaw is going to turn into what he has. And again, sample size has shown that he's just not been able to stay on the field, unfortunately. So there's a role for him. Again, injuries happen, right? Certain players who you think that are going to, Kevin Gibbons could get injured all of a sudden, like he has to play a little bit more. But yeah, go ahead, stuff.
do you think that maybe he is a candidate to be traded? Because I know a couple people have brought it up, and
For
it's funny
what?
because whatever Rob does with anytime someone says something good about Trey Lance, I'm like, or Rob says that it's because they want to trade him. Well, I'm kind of gonna do the same thing with Javon Kinlaw, and
Wow.
I'm gonna say that maybe Javon Kinlaw is a trade candidate this season. Final year with the team. There are 49er disciples out there who may be interested. I'm looking at you, D'Amico. So it's a possibility. It doesn't hurt to hype a guy up. Now, I don't think that's why Steve Wilkes said those things, and he didn't need to say those things. I think Steve Wilkes strikes me as someone who's very honest and very straightforward. So I don't think he was just making those things up, and I don't think he was saying that just to try to get trade value out of Kinlaw. But I do kind of wonder if it's a possibility this season. Maybe.
Well, we've seen them do it before. I mean, John Lynch tried to tell people with a straight face that Trey Sermon was incredible in camp, and I don't think anybody who was there could even utter those words, let alone John Lynch. And that was in an attempt to trade him, which they eventually wound up cutting him, and someone else picked him up for nothing. But my question would be, what are you going to get back for him? I mean, at this point, you invested the 13th pick. He's replacing DeForest Buckner. Are you so desperate to get away from him that you'll take a 5th or 6th round pick at this point for him? And his salary is not even that big in the 4th year, right? Like it's the 5th year that would be that. The 49ers didn't pick up his option. Surprise, surprise. Makes sense. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, if they lose Javon Kinlaw and he walks and he goes to another team the next year, I don't think you look at him and say, man, we should have just got that fifth or sixth round pick for him. I do think you watch him a little bit more and just see, and there's nothing wrong with having depth and allowing that to happen. Again, the 49ers have almost $10 million in cap space, even after signing their entire draft class and every single undrafted free agent right now. Now they have three options. One, you go after a free agent pass rusher. Two, you leave that open for if during the season you have a need somewhere and you have a player who can impact the team and help you, a la Christian McCaffrey, right? And you have the space to maneuver with that. Or three, you keep that $10 million and you roll it over and the cap increases next year. So you're able to keep Brandon Ayuk. You make sure that the Bosa deal, when it gets done and it starts to toll, which would be the next year, would be under and you can still sign players and keep guys. So the 49ers still have a bunch of leeway. So I do understand, like, the idea of, well, let's get a pick. The 49ers have been far more successful in the fifth and sixth round than they have in the third. That's going to change this year with Jair Brown and Jake Moody, Offensive Player of the Year. That's definitely going to change this year. But again, like it's more about what can you get, and I think that you still should watch him play, watch it play out, because if he does become an important rotational piece, especially given the injuries that can happen on the defensive line, I think that's more valuable than just shipping him off and losing depth at a position that you need that defensive line to be tough. You need it to continue to be tough. And if sparingly using him as a rotational piece is going to unlock impact, then I do think that that's more valuable than getting a fifth or sixth round pick for him and shipping him off somewhere else, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was just throwing out the idea. But here's another defensive line guy that Steve Wilks hyped up.
Yep.
His name is Drake Jackson.
Yep.
And he's someone that I think we're all kind of looking to as like, hey, like you do have to step up this season. And this is why I said, like, Steve Wilks, he doesn't mince his words. Like, he's a very straightforward guy, honest. He was asked about what he saw from Drake Jackson on film based on his like rookie year. Saw a lot of inconsistency. I like that he said that, right? Like, he's keeping it real, he's keeping it honest, but he also said he saw a lot of talent, a lot of skill set, but someone that needs to really get a little strong, get a little bigger. Well, what has Drake Jackson been doing? Steve Wilks said he's been there all spring working out, doing the things that he needs to do to improve his game, and that he's gained a lot of weight. And I'm just excited to see exactly how he's going to progress in his second year. So we're looking at a sophomore leap here potentially. And, if his conditioning is right, if his weight is right, I think Drake Jackson could do big things this year with this team. And I'm really excited about it. He's just 22 years old. Like, he's just scratching the surface of his potential. So I'm really liking this is hype that I'm buying into this offseason. And I'm looking forward to a really big year for him.
Yeah, and Steve Wilks said Drake has been doing the things that he needs to do to improve his game. He's gained a lot of weight. I'm just excited to see exactly how he's going to progress in his second year. That was the concern with him coming out first, right? He had the finesse pass rush moves. He needed to gain a little weight because you have to win in different ways. Those are not always going to work. And then he had to improve with his run pursuit, which would allow him to stay on the field for 3 downs, like to be a 3-down edge. And to hear that he's gained the weight, that's a good step. Not because, that's something that I was concerned with or that everybody was kind of concerned with. It's that when the 49ers have this amount of money and they're not running out to get Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Houston, Leonard Floyd, any of these guys that are still available, it means that they really believe in Drake Jackson. They believe that he's going to take the leap. And I think in the small time that you saw him, you saw the flashes. I mean, he had was it him that had the interception against the Raiders? There were times when he would blow past offensive linemen. Yeah, exactly. It's there. The consistency needs to be there. And I want to point to what Kyle Shanahan said at the end of the year about Drake Jackson kind of hitting the rookie wall. And, again, you play a certain amount of games, you play a certain amount of snaps, but then the NFL game is a lot more brutal, a lot more physical. So you start to lose that. This is where the weight comes in. This is where the conditioning comes in. So I do like to hear this about Drake Jackson because they are absolutely counting on him. So, I like hearing that about him. I buy this hype. Again, you said he's 22. And when You hear John Lynch say, well, you have your board and then you realize that certain players are available. We had no idea Drake Jackson would be available to us at 61. Sounds to me like they had a first-round grade on him, and a lot of other teams did. It's just the way that the draft shook out is where they got him. So I'm excited for Drake Jackson. I am 100% buying this hype as well, too. And it better work because the 49ers are definitely looking to him, and they're going to have Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant and a bunch of other guys who are going to fill in, Kerry Hyder as rotational guys. But it sounds like Drake Jackson's the guy on the other side from Nick Bosa. So very excited to see that as well, too. So, Steph, thank you for your time. 50 minutes in. Make sure you guys like this video. Subscribe to all 3 channels. Gold Standard on YouTube. Steph 49K. Jason Aponte on YouTube. You can do all 3 of those things. Like all the videos on those channels. Subscribe to all 3 channels. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your audio podcasts. Make sure that you're following GSN Podcast on Twitter and GSN 49ers on Instagram. For Steph and for Jay, we're out of here.
Peace.